Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another Community Connections with Ryan Sauers. We have a great guest today, my friend and colleague, Deb Gogliettino. Got that right, I think, with us. Deb is the Associate Dean in Business of HR at South New Hampshire University Global Campus, serving over 150,000 students worldwide. I can't even begin to give credence to all her talents. But Deb, my friend, thank you for coming on the show.
Ryan, it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to share some new insights about what we need to do as leaders going forward into our future. So I'm happy to be able to do that.
Well, I love it. And I love guests who have information where we can just pour into our audience. So real quick, you want to just broad brush, human resources is a huge area. A lot of people don't even know what that even means, but you wanted to share your, quick second of your background so we know you're the expert.
Sure. So I spent well over 30 years in human resources management, 25 of that actually at the C-suite level. So that's the highest, most aggravating level that you want to be at. And after that career, I came to Southern New Hampshire University, really initially I took a job as full-time faculty because they wanted to create a bachelor's degree in human resources, which is what I'm working on right now. So I have oversight for the undergrad and grad human resources courses and faculty, which really is a function of leadership, of making sure the organization culture is the way that you need it, making sure organizational strategies are built with a human element and a moral element. That's the key for us.
Well, and Deb, I think honestly, you're preaching my language. Now we're talking leadership and stuff. So it's fun to... But, honestly, I think I said this in an email to you, sometimes we've used the term human resources so long, in my opinion, that we may be forgetting the word human, the human. And what's your take? I know we're going to get into a little more real-time stuff that's pretty powerful, but what is your take? And, we've got people for 2 years now working in weird environments, and most people I know are looking to hire. So this makes human resources critical right now, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ryan, when we try to think about kind of the human element, it means that those of us that are human resources professionals and practitioners, we need to teach managers, leaders, top leaders, our organizations, how to look at the whole person, right? In the 50s, 60s, 70s, when we went to work, we compartmentalized. We just went to work and we went home. But 80s, 90s, this 21st century, a person is bringing their whole self to work. And so what we need to do as HR professionals is actually open up the eyeballs of the leaders and say, wait a minute, that person comes into work with a family issue, a concern, a diverse view, and it's our obligation to open up that mindset going forward.
I love that because, I remember when I opted for before I started my doctorate, my master's in org leadership. And that was a new degree at that point because if you go back, it was an MBA, get an MBA. But it was what was missing, I thought, was the softer skills. And I know you probably agree. And so people I know, some of them say, if I have more flexibility or I can be with my family more, I might work for less money because there's a lifestyle versus, hey, in the 50s or 60s, people start and they stay there for 30 years. It's a whole different ballgame that's changed with generations, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you look at the workforce, right, the boomers like myself, we're either doing something different or we're out. And so newer generations are coming forward and they come forward with different needs. And those needs are really about the balance in their life. I just read a statistic this morning that employees that are age 40 to 45 are not returning to the workforce.
Is that right?
They're doing something entirely different. Women also struggled with COVID because now they were at home and you have childcare issues and so forth and so on. So they're not returning to the workforce at this particular time. May change in the future. But that now that 40 to 50 plus, that age group, plus some of the Gen Zers, the younger individuals are the workforce. So we have to change the way we're doing things.
Yeah. So I'll say it. I'm still 49. I'm gonna enjoy that last year. So I'm right in the middle of there. And I believed. I looked at the pandemic as what I kept calling the Great Reset. That's what in my mind, the Great Reset. I'd like to hear your opinion before we go into the other stuff. But I think now is a great chance for all companies to really rethink what their greatest asset is, their people. And what are they going to do differently? Because to your point, there's people, I use the word pivot's been used 8 million times, but things have changed. And I think forever, it's almost been 24 months of this stuff. So, whether it's a, Fortune 100 or 500 company or a small business, what do you say to that person that says, yeah, well, working from home is just not going to be a thing we're going to do, and they're going to have to get back in here, maybe to challenge them to think differently?
Yeah. So first, I try not to be too impatient with that. I want to just hit them in the head and say, "You got to be kidding me, really?
Yeah, right.
Like, what are you thinking about?" But
right.
A couple things I say to them is, number one, the reset, as you call it, Ryan, is here. This is it. This is what our work is today. It's not. We're not going back to any. I must say this a zillion times a day. We're not going back to anything. So now you have to look at that human capital, that person who's always going to need a job, whether you have technology or not. There's always going to be some kind of role for a human being at work. Mm-hmm. Now you have to figure out, okay, how do I get them and how do I keep them? And the way that you do it is with a balanced approach to look at them as a whole human being and be able to recognize what's important to them and how they're and build them a role so they can help your company grow and sustain. So,
and I was just going to say, Deb, but oftentimes when I'm doing consulting with companies, I find people want to share the ideas they have for the organization, but they're not like tapped into. And that's an important thing for leaders to consider and think about daily.
Absolutely. So what used to happen in the past is leaders would come and say, well, I have all this experience, therefore I know. Right. Guess what? You don't know. Nope. No more do you know, because the pace of change, this, Ryan, in your own business. I know this certainly in my university business, that the pace of change is something that we can't even contend with anymore because it's just constant. I always tease my colleagues and say, open up my screen and I wonder what's going to be there today. That wasn't there yesterday. But no longer is it just do it the way I did it before. Can't work.
Yes, and it's interesting, when we use the word leadership, and then we'll get into this talk about this trend I want to talk about for the future. Yeah. The thing is now, I was an early social media adopter stuff, but trying to keep up with everything that's changing, which was 14 years ago, is nearly impossible, nor do I want to do it. Yeah. But it really is saying, my 14-year-old youngest daughter can find something on my phone that I don't even know it is there in 5 seconds. So in that case, she's even at 14, she's the leader. Or my kids are going, why are you searching out for my birthday, scrolling through hundreds of pictures when you can just put in their face? I'm like, when did that become a feature? And they're like 10 years ago, so it shows you, in that situation, I certainly am following. And I would say, then you tap into those people for the things that they're wise about, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. What's important for leaders to do is to recognize, is to embrace that diversity. And it isn't a fad, it's a necessity. It's a necessity for leaders to understand that those diverse viewpoints, wherever that person is coming from, adds value to the future of their organization. That is absolutely key. So they have to be, that's why we're going to talk in a minute about Morgan and the mindsets that leaders have to have, because you have to be open to learning.
Yeah, let's jump into that, because one of the things I don't know anybody, I guess, unless they're completely retired and, living on the beach somewhere, that is not thinking about, but even so, I think those people, you still want your brain to keep learning. I mean, or you're going backwards. So we're talking about Jacob Morgan, and you've really dove into some research that caught my eye. Really talking about the skills and mindsets leaders need to succeed in this next decade. Before we know it, we're going to be in 2022. Feels like this year, right? So, I mean, what do you, this is such a big can of worms, and we might have to revisit in a future episode. It's so big, but
absolutely.
What's the research saying, predicting for, when you talk about Jake Morgan and the next decade, and what can we teach our audience today?
Okay, so key things for our audience. One is you need to be curious. You need to have a growth mindset. So earlier I said you can't come to the plate thinking that because you've done something for 25 years and you're now sitting in a much higher position that you know everything.
Exactly.
Throw that out the window because
Yep.
that does not work anymore. So you've always got to consider new ideas and views from other sources, other individuals, and from the employees that are in your work group. And what are they going to bring to the plate? So you've always got to be open about that. And the way that you do that is eliminate the bias, right? You eliminate the bias in your thinking. Think about it. You might be a manager who's, let's say, 55 years old, and all of a sudden this 27-year-old comes in your office and you're thinking, well, what do they know? They've only lived 27 years. They haven't lived as long. Guess what? They have insights into maybe the way you could do things that you, as in your agent space, would not think about. So that's number one. Number two, you have to be what he calls the chef, the master of balance. And what does that mean? You have to balance everything that's going on in technology, AI, robotics, virtual reality, you name it, with a human element. An argument I make all the time to people is there's still going to be people at work.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether or not you take some of their activities and a robot uses those activities, you have to make that bridge, right? You have to make that bridge going forward and be able to kind of get the right recipe.
100%. Yep.
Get the right recipe for that. So you have to know how to balance that. You have to be that chef, he says. The other thing he says is, hey, look at, and so this gets to the heart of what you're saying, Ryan. Based in humanity, there is this kind of viewpoint about serving others, right? So, and we call, in your own studies, you study Greenleaf, you study servant leadership. And that has to become the regular practice for us. And so where does that start? That starts with the team. That starts with and then it goes to the individual, and then you're last.
Right.
Because the team is where you're going to get your energy, your new ideas, and you're going to be able to move your business forward. And then the third thing is to look at yourself as a global citizen. And that doesn't mean somebody who's traveling every place. It just means that you recognize diversity and equity and inclusion, and you make a place for that employee at the table to be able to speak and to share their ideas.
Yeah, I love that, because Greenleaf and Spears, and you're not going to talk about the servant leadership model, but I was thinking, and I was being interviewed about 6 months ago, and if I wasn't finalizing my dissertation right now, I'd write a book on this. But the idea came to me: people want to be served, not sold. So when I'm teaching sales and marketing people, I'm like, quit selling at them. Educate, share. If they want to do it, they're going to do it because they want to, not because they have to. And people keep going back, even in sales, marketing, to what they've always done. And I'm like, you're shouting at them, buy this car. But that's not how things work. And if we treat our people, our most valuable asset, like we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, I mean, not only are we behind the times, we're not even in the ball game.
And so the population of workers that we have, those that are, whether they're remote, whether they're in an office, whether they're in a hybrid situation, this population wants to be developed. They want to grow. They want you to be the coach and the facilitator for them. They don't want a boss. That's gone. That's been gone for a long time, right? But they want to be able to be accepted, to know that there's someone who's going to watch out for them and help them get to the next stage, whether it's another economic level, whether it's a different company, whether it's a different job. They want someone to watch for them and to watch out for them and to really serve them, but bring them to the table for the conversation. And you know what? That takes a really strong sense of your own self as a leader to do that, and to give up something. So it's not about you always pushing the agenda. It's about others.
It's so funny. I was talking to my wife last night, and I've recently launched a radio podcast network, and we have about 10 hosts now. And, I do this stuff kind of for a living, but I was naming a few people, and I said, they're better than I am. And she said, you know what, though? The sign of a great leader is 15 years ago, you wouldn't have said that. She said, you were always trying to compete with them. And I said, I'm good, but they're really good. And so I've really taken to, my own, like you said, you got to take your own bias out of the way. But if you want to be, the good to great type thing, you really want to get and be the best. It's getting your people. If you get to, what is the saying? Get the right people on the bus, you can do anything.
Yeah, Colin,
that's true.
I just love it. So really, your job as the leader is to make that right fit.
You're right.
First of all, to understand the human element enough to know who to go get to, who to get, how do I get that person, right? And then and we have a saying in human resources is that you hire for attitude and train for skills.
Nice.
You've got to have the right fit. Got to have the person who's going to bring their whole presence to you, and then you can teach them anything. You
So
really can.
let me ask you a question. I had a debate once, and I think this was my master's thesis, and the debate was, if you had to choose somebody with character or competence hiring, what would you choose? And I said character. I said, if they're smart, I can teach them the skill, but if they don't have character, I'm not sure what I'm working with. And it was an interesting debate of like, I'll take the competence because, it was interesting, but I think that's even more important now, because if you listen at some younger generations, they use the word, they don't say my company, they say my team. I need to talk to my team. Companies doing it well. Other companies are like, I got to talk to my boss. I got to talk to my boss. Word choice is important in that. And I'm going, well, they don't feel part of something, or they feel very much, okay, I'll just pass the paper on. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that is really outdated.
Yeah, and Ryan, the generation that's coming into, let's put the kind of the 40s and the 50-year-olds aside for a second, but the next generation that's coming in, they have a desire to be included. They want to be part of a group. Just quick example, I had a young woman on my team. She was probably in her early 30s, brand new master's from human resources, and I was promoting her, right? So I did what every boss does. I said, I'll give you an office. She said, I don't want one. I said, excuse me, you don't want an office? She said, I want to stay in here with my coworker, Christine, because I can talk to her back and forth and she can teach me real time. Now that like blew my head. It was like, okay, then that's what I did. And they cohabited this office, and she grew like an unbelievable amount in terms of her knowledge. So
Deb, to your point, I would think the same thing. The way, this is what having to unlearn what you think is get in the corner office or a bigger office. To me, is like, hey, here you go, good job. And what they're saying is, I actually don't want that, which would be counterintuitive to my own bias of going, what? But that's okay. I need to, like you said, that's a great example, because I would not have thought that. And that's, are we talking about Gen Z more? Correct? Okay.
Gen Zers, yeah, absolutely. The Gen Zers.
Gen Z. And that, how big a generation is that compared to? I know mine, Gen X is small, Boomers big.
Gen X is small. Zs are probably bigger than. I'm not sure if they're bigger than Boomers or not. That's something I'd have to look up.
But millennials are large. Millennials are big.
Millennials are large.
Yeah,
You're right. Your generation's is small.
Yeah, well, we kind of just get overlooked. They're kind of like, we're kind of like these people floating around.
Who cares about them, right?
Yeah, we got 15 more years to work. The young people think you're old. The old people say, yeah, they don't even talk about us. That's okay. But yeah, my kids, my oldest one's finishing college right now and wants to go to med school. But so I'm seeing these Gen Z. It's very interesting. And, are there some generational differences? People always use, if they don't know the term, millennials for everything. That's not the right term anymore. Some millennials are in their, I don't know, mid 30s, mid to late 30s, possibly.
So the characteristics that I see are about it's a couple of things, Ryan. One is, what do they expect from work?
Mm-hmm.
How do they connect to the organization, right? So when the boomers, where my life is, I would connect to the organization. I was mostly mission driven, but I wanted to be able to move up and so forth and so on. But the younger generations I see really want to connect to, what is that company doing for the community?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? How is it being a responsible corporate citizen? They actually make their decisions that way. I'm thinking like, man, I never thought of that when I was 27. I just wanted to work, right?
I know, right? Yep.
That was
get that office.
And get that.
Get the office.
Yeah, go. Can I have that corner office?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, but the newer generations they have a much larger social ethical bent about where they're going to spend their work time. And so that's another challenge for leaders in the workplace, because you have to understand that, and B, you have to value it. You have to value it in the conversation and not dismiss it, and give that worker, that employee, kind of an opportunity to really express that and to influence the corporate responsibility of the organization itself.
I love the part about the community, since we're on the community connections show, and that's what I thought we could go into. But I find often when it's younger people texting, emailing, wanting me to communicate back with them, and I'm giving this as guidance to people maybe a little older, you can have a huge advantage and actually really dig deep if you call them back or talk to them, because my kids would much prefer texting versus talking. But when I can really talk and really start to, they will open up if you listen.
Yeah.
But the common misconception I hear is, yeah, they'd never reply. And that's not digging deep enough. You're just saying, you're putting everybody in a box, and that's not correct, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah. And Ryan, I'm finding that employers are looking for employees, whatever generation they're in, that actually can have this kind of communication, whether it's through Zoom, or even if we're on Zoom, we're still face to face. I can
Right.
still see people, right? So yeah, exactly. But they're looking for individuals that actually can make that connection and have good communication skills. I know that in the work that we do at Southern New Hampshire, we're actually kind of forcing students to get on a video, to be reflective in a journal, to tell us what's going on kind of in their heads, so that as faculty leaders, we can respond to that. Absolutely.
Oh, and just taking a second, South New Hampshire University has, I've had my eye on for years, meaning that that's really what the workforce wants and needs, because we don't need any more people coming. I mean, it's like my kids. It's great to memorize the world map, but really you can pull that up in your computer in 5 seconds. I need someone to think of ideas that haven't even been created yet. And you know, what's what companies want. They don't want someone to go, hey, I pulled this on Google. Here you go, Ryan. Can you? I'm like, what do you think? You know, and to me, yes, there's gonna be more robots and AI and stuff, but the people that think and continue to learn, there's always going to be a place for those kind of people.
Ryan, when I talk to employers, and I do that quite often, I'll say to them, you know, what is the skill gap that you still see? And they'll say to me, okay, we have young employees who really love them, you know, they're very enthusiastic. But sometimes what happens is I'll give them an assignment. This is the employer talking. I'll give them an assignment and they don't take it all the way, right? So they'll do some pieces of it, but they never quite get over the hump of that critical thinking and bring the whole resolution to the employer. So those are the things that we are constantly drilling on in our coursework, and I'm talking to employers about it and talking to HR students about it. It's like, you've got to really think about that. And so one of the ways that we do that is just put students in scenarios, right? And just say, hey, this is going to happen to you at work, so let's practice it before you get there, right?
Well, Deb, I'll give you an example. I posted something on social media today, and it was something that came to me this morning, and I said, what did I say? No response is still a response. In other words, I see so many people that they don't want to say X, Y, Z. They're communicating something by either they forgot, they don't remember, they can't get back to you. And I've had people, I kind of test them. You know, I give them assignments like you're talking about, and if they can't handle the most basic things, I'm not going to hand a bigger thing.
That's right.
And so I've seen that too. But I was like, no response is still a response. And what I mean by that, it could be, you know, that you forgot, it wasn't important to you, whatever it is, it comes across as a message. And I just thought of that a minute ago, because it really is, when I'm having to chase somebody down, I'm going, well, what's your reasoning for? I don't know what the reason, but it doesn't usually come off in the positive way. So
yeah. What I always suggest to young professionals and any professionals that might be listening today is that if you get a small assignment, you want to take whatever assignment you get, right? And you want to do that assignment really well. You want to bring your whole self to it, and you want to do it with your big heart, because once you can do the small things, then there's confidence from the leader that you can do the larger things. And so 100%. If you do the small thing with good critical thinking, good problem solving, your great follow-up, and you bring a new idea to the plate, things, if the leader is with an open mindset, then that leader is going to be able to actually give you other things to do, and then you'll grow in your career.
Yeah, the growth mindset is one of the parts of my dissertation, what I'm working on. And I see some of my friends that are near my age, they have the, you know, like,
oh yeah,
and they're not open to anything. It's like, I don't know why you would do it this way. And I'm thinking, the fact that you don't understand that you have a bad rating on Google And they're like, well, that's not my fault that it happened. I'm like, I don't care. But that's what's out there. I can't fix it. It's sure. But they want to tell me what happened. I'm like, that's what the public's seeing. But I'm big on, and I encourage other people to get the input from all your employees. And then you got to take it and figure out what to do with it. But if people don't feel valued, they just kind of tend to sit on the sidelines.
And the other thing, Ryan, that I think we used to do in the old days a lot is you would, leaders would kind of, wouldn't let you fail. Okay. Today, failure is what we sort of want you to do, right? Because in failure, you want to be in an organization that's going to be open to, not meaning like disaster, but maybe something doesn't work exactly the way you need to do it, because now the leader who's got that growth mindset says, okay, that didn't work. Let's sit down. Let's take a look at this. And how could we have done this differently? Or what do we need to do different in the past? We can't have a work environment where people are afraid to fail.
Or play it safe. Play it safe,
Then you don't grow, you don't sustain, and the employee, the professional person, or whoever that person is, doesn't bring their best self to work. And that's the problem.
I love that. It's so important. And it's so, but behind every success, we have like Edison or whatever, is many failures. And I say failures, missteps, learning opportunities, that if we embrace those and do something with them, we're going to be far ahead as organizations on the other side.
Yeah. And one of the things I think that strikes me about the new leader for the future is it's hard work. Right. As somebody going, again, I can think of a million colleagues that got to the places I got to, and they were just kind of folding their arms. No, I'm the boss. And I'm not sure what they did, frankly. I was busy doing what I was doing.
Right.
But it's hard work because there's more people, more human connection expected. And so you've got to use your emotional intelligence. You have to be aware. You've got to be able to really support that person. And to the point that your wife made, it, you got to pick the person who's smarter than you.
You do. And it took me a long time to learn that. But, I look back 10, 15 years ago, if I would have done that, I would have grown faster. And we do have to remove our bias and our ego, because that's how you build a better team. And, we got a community connections. This will be like our 73rd show of some sort. And I know I got to wrap us up here in a second, but what final words do you have right now for people that are either looking to get a job, or they've been at home, or, trying to follow their passion, and maybe the people looking to hire that say, we can't find anybody?
I think one of the key things for individuals looking now is to make sure that whatever they're looking for connects to their values and to the core of who they are. Because if you find a job first of all, you got to understand what that core is. But if you find a job that connects to your core, it's not a job.
Right.
That's kind of,
so it's a calling.
Yeah. It is. And I think for the leaders who are looking for that employee to fill those particular positions, they need to be willing to take the risk to hire for attitude and train for skills.
Oh, man,
they've got to be able to do that. Absolutely.
Well, we're going to have to do this again, because this is so important. I mean, it's so passionate, but it's hitting a nerve. It's going to be mammoth coming back in the next few months of everybody looking for people and people restructuring. And I agree with what you said earlier. We're not going back. We're moving forward. The word pivot, we have now pivoted and then cemented, and now it's looking at the future. Well, Deb, thank you so much for coming on my show.
My pleasure. And I'm happy to come back and talk about the workforce and opportunities even more.
No, I want to do that because people ask me every day, and you're the expert on that. I know enough to be dangerous, but but I'll have you back on, because people usually like 20 minutes, pull in some nuggets. I'll be getting this out to you in the podcast form, or video form, but thanks for all you do. And thanks for sharing your insights.
Absolutely. My pleasure. You have a great day.
All right. I'm going to close this out here. Folks, you've been listening to another Community Connections with Ryan Sauers. Special guest, Deb Gogliettino from South New Hampshire University, HR Ninja, I think is the word. Deb, again, thanks for being on. And folks, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again next time.